October 1st, 331 BC. Gaugamela, northern Mesopotamia. Before dawn, Alexander of Macedon stares across a dust-choked plain at over 40,000 Persian cavalry. They stretch horizon to horizon, chariots bristling with scythes, armored horses stamping in perfect rows. His 7,000 companions tighten their grips on spears slick with sweat. The Persians beat shields. The ground trembles. In minutes, hopelessly outnumbered, Alexander will give one order that breaks an empire forever. Two empires stand at the edge of annihilation. The first stretches from the Nile to the Indus, from the burning sands of Egypt to the snow-capped peaks of the Hindu Kush. It commands the loyalty of 40 nations, controls the world's gold, and fields armies so vast they take days to pass a single point on the road. This is Persia, the greatest empire the world has ever seen. At its center sits Darius III, King of Kings, Light of the Aryans, ruler of 20 million souls. The second empire exists only in the mind of a 25-year-old boy king. Alexander of Macedon stands 5'7". He commands 40,000 infantry and 7,000 cavalry. His kingdom is a backwater of sheep farmers and mountain warriors that most Persians cannot find on a map. 3 years ago, his father was stabbed to death at a wedding. 2 years ago, Greek city-states rebelled against him. 1 year ago, he crossed into Asia with a treasury so empty he had to borrow money for supplies. Now he marches into the heart of Persia itself. What most people do not know is that this is their second meeting. 2 years earlier, at a narrow coastal plain called Issus, Alexander shattered a Persian army twice his size and sent Darius fleeing for his life, abandoning his mother, his wife, his children. The humiliation burned through the Persian court like wildfire. Darius offered peace, gold, territory, his daughter's hand in marriage. Alexander refused everything. So Darius won every horseman from every corner of his empire. He conscripted the Scythians from beyond the Black Sea, warriors who tied the scalps of enemies to their bridles. He hired Greek mercenaries by the thousands. He mobilized the Bactrian cavalry, armored head to hoof in bronze scales. He assembled war chariots fitted with scythes that could slice through infantry lines like wheat. The Persian host numbered over 200,000 men, and they marched to a place called Gaugamela, a flat plain in northern Mesopotamia near the Tigris River, and they waited. For weeks, Persian engineers flattened the ground, removing every stone, every shrub, every irregularity that might slow a chariot wheel. They watered the dust until it packed hard as brick. They created the perfect killing ground, open, flat, designed for the Persian cavalry to encircle and crush any army foolish enough to meet them there. Then, Alexander's scouts saw the campfires. They stretched across the horizon like a constellation fallen to earth. The Macedonian camp falls silent as the sun sets on September 30th. Every man can see them now. The Persian fires, thousands upon thousands, a glowing sea that seems to have no end. The soldiers stop sharpening their weapons. They stop talking. They stand at the edge of their own camp and stare across the darkening plain at an empire that wants them dead. Parmenion, Alexander's oldest general, a man who fought beside Alexander's father, walks through the Macedonian lines and sees the fear in every face. These are veterans who have marched 1,000 miles, who have conquered cities and crossed mountains, but tonight they whisper prayers to gods they have not thought about in years. The Persians outnumber them 5-1, maybe more. In the darkness, it is impossible to tell where the enemy camp ends. Parmenion finds Alexander in his tent. The king is asleep, not restless, not tossing, deeply, peacefully asleep, as if tomorrow is just another day. Parmenion considers waking him. They should attack now, under cover of darkness, before the Persians can form their lines. But he cannot bring himself to disturb the boy. He leaves the tent shaking his head. Across the plain, Darius does not sleep. He stands in his command tent surrounded by maps and generals, and he paces. He has done everything right this time. He chose the ground. He has the numbers. He has flattened the terrain so his chariots will be unstoppable. His cavalry will sweep around Alexander's flanks like the wings of a great bird and crush the Macedonians from every side at once. There will be no escape. No clever tactics, just weight of numbers and the inevitable mathematics of slaughter. But something gnaws at him. At Issus, Darius had the advantage. At Issus, he was certain. And at Issus, Alexander did something impossible. So tonight, Darius keeps his entire army awake and armed, certain that Alexander will try a night attack. The Persians stand in formation through the cold darkness, gripping their weapons, straining to see movement in the shadows. Hours pass. Their legs ache. Their eyes burn. Nothing comes. Alexander, warm in his tent, sleeps like a child. At dawn, his generals finally wake him. The sun is already rising. Alexander stretches, eats breakfast, and walks calmly to the front of his army. He does not look worried. He does not look afraid. He looks at the Persian host, a dark mass stretching across the entire width of the plain, and he smiles. Then he gives an order that makes no sense to anyone. We march right. The plain of Gaugamela is not beautiful. It is flat and pitiless, an expanse of packed earth and pale dust that stretches beneath an enormous sky. There are no trees for shade, no hills for cover, no rivers to anchor a flank. It is a void, a nothing place, the kind of ground that makes infantry feel naked and small. And it is exactly what Darius wanted. The Persian army deploys in a line so long it seems to curve with the horizon. In the center, Darius himself stands in his war chariot, surrounded by his household cavalry, the immortals, 10,000 men who have never known defeat. To his left, the Bactrian cavalry, their horses huge and terrible, armored in overlapping plates of bronze. To his right, the Scythian horsemen, wild-eyed and howling. In front of them all, 200 scythed chariots, their wheels fitted with curved blades, designed to amputate legs and disembowel horses. The Macedonian army looks like a child's toy by comparison. Alexander forms his men into a strange, slanted line, what historians will later call the oblique formation. His right wing, where he positions himself and his companion cavalry, angles forward. His left wing, under Parmenion, holds back. The center, packed with infantry, forms the hinge. To the Persians, it looks broken, unfinished, wrong. Darius frowns. What is the boy doing? Then Alexander gives the order, and the Macedonian army begins to move, but not forward. Right. Laterally, sliding across the prepared ground toward rougher terrain at the edge of the plain where the Persian engineers did not flatten. Darius sees the danger immediately. If Alexander reaches the uneven ground, the chariots will be useless. The entire advantage of this battlefield will vanish. "Left wing!" Darius shouts. "Advance and engage! Pin them down!" The Scythian and Bactrian cavalry, over 40,000 horsemen, surge forward in a dark wave, kicking up clouds of dust that blot out the morning sun. The sound is like continuous thunder. The Macedonian left wing braces, and Parmenion, old and exhausted from a sleepless night, watches death ride toward him at full gallop. But Alexander keeps drifting right. Parmenion's wing bends, stretches, begins to pull apart from the center. A gap opens in the Macedonian line, a wound in the formation, exactly where the seam between the left wing and the center strains and tears. Darius sees it. Every Persian commander sees it. The trap has sprung. The storm breaks with a sound like the earth splitting open. 40,000 Persian cavalry thunder across the plain in a coordinated wave that stretches from horizon to horizon. The Scythians scream war cries in languages older than empires. The Bactrians ride in perfect disciplined lines, sunlight flashing off bronze scales that cover horse and rider alike. Behind them, 200 scythed chariots begin their rumbling advance, wheels fitted with curved blades that spin and glint like circular saws. The dust rises first as a thin veil, then thickens into choking clouds that turn morning into twilight. The Macedonian left wing, commanded by Parmenion, locks shields and braces. They are infantry holding against mounted warriors, a mathematics problem with only one answer. The Persian cavalry crashes into them like a storm wave against a cliff. Spears snap, men scream, horses rear and kick and bite. The Macedonians absorb the blow, their phalanx compressing under the weight but not breaking. Not yet, but the pressure is unbearable and everyone knows they cannot hold forever. The chariots accelerate, drivers whipping their horses into full gallop, the scythed wheels beginning to hum. Macedonian light infantry sprint forward, javelins in hand, no armor, essentially sacrificing themselves, and they hurl their weapons at the horses. Animals scream and tumble. Chariots flip end over end, crushing their own crews. But dozens more keep coming, smashing through the gaps, and where they pass, men are torn apart in sprays of red mist. The blades don't just cut, they mulch. And still, Alexander does not move. He sits on Bucephalus at the head of his companion cavalry. 7,000 riders formed into a wedge shape behind him, motionless as statues. His officers glance at him, then at the battle, then back at him. Parmenian's wing is bending. The gap between the left and center is widening. Persian cavalry is already pouring through it. Alexander watches the Persian left overextend. He watches them commit deeper. He watches their formation lose cohesion as they chase what they think is a collapsing enemy. He watches them drift away from Darius, away from the center, leaving the King of Kings exposed. The moment crystallizes. Alexander lowers his spear until it points like an accusation at Darius himself, 300 yards away, across corpse-strewn ground. "Companions," he says quietly, "with me." And he digs his heels into Bucephalus. The wedge moves like a single living thing. 7,000 companions form a spearhead with Alexander at the tip, and they accelerate from stillness to full gallop in seconds. The ground shakes. The sound is not like thunder. It is thunder, a continuous rolling boom that drowns out screams and the clash of bronze. The wedge aims for the gap the Persians created, the wound in their own line, and it drives toward it like a blade toward flesh. Persian officers see it coming. They shout orders. They try to wheel cavalry units to intercept. But they are too slow, too committed to their attack on Parmenion, too confident that this boy king would never do something so insane as charge straight into the center of an army 20 times his size. The companions hit the Persian line at full speed. The impact is not a clash. It is an obliteration. Horses and men collide with the force of battering rams. Persian cavalry are simply erased, knocked backward, trampled, crushed beneath hooves, or impaled on the sarissas, 18-foot spears that punch through bronze armor like paper. The wedge does not slow. It punches deeper, widening the gap with every stride, and Alexander is at the very front, his white-plumed helmet visible to every man on both sides. He is cutting a straight line toward Darius. The Persian household cavalry, the immortals, rush to intercept. These are the empire's finest, veteran warriors who have served the throne for generations. They form a wall of horseflesh and bronze between their king and this Macedonian boy. Alexander does not slow down. The companions slam into them, and for 30 seconds the fighting is so compressed and vicious that men are stabbing enemies pressed chest to chest against them. Darius stands in his chariot, elevated above the chaos, and watches Alexander getting closer. 50 yards, 40, 30. The immortals are dying. The wedge is still coming. And Darius sees something in Alexander's eyes. Not rage, not battle fury, but cold, absolute certainty. This boy believes he will reach the King of Kings. This boy believes he cannot be stopped. Darius's driver sees it too. Without orders, he wheels the chariot around. Darius tries to shout, to order him to stop, to hold position, to fight. But the words catch in his throat because he remembers Issus, remembers fleeing, remembers the nightmares. The chariot turns and runs, and every Persian soldier sees their king retreat. The collapse is not gradual, it is instantaneous. One moment, the Persian center is a disciplined formation of tens of thousands, cavalry, infantry, archers, all waiting their turn to enter the fight. The next moment, they see the royal chariot racing away from the battlefield, dust streaming behind it, and something fundamental breaks inside them. Why are we still here if the king has abandoned us? The question spreads like plague. Soldiers look at each other. They look at the Macedonian wedge still driving forward, unstoppable, leaving a trail of Persian dead. They look at where Darius was and see only empty ground. Unit commanders scream orders, but the men are already backing away, and backing becomes jogging, and jogging becomes running, and running becomes full panicked flight. 40,000 Persian cavalry simply disintegrate. They flee east, south, north, anywhere away from Alexander. They crash into their own infantry, who see the cavalry running and immediately join them. What most people do not know is that the Persian center, the massive force Darius assembled to crush Alexander, never engaged at all. They were waiting to deliver the killing blow, and instead they watched their king flee and decided to do the same. The dust clouds become so thick that visibility drops to a few feet. Men are trampled by their own comrades. Horses collide and go down in screaming tangles. Macedonian cavalry pursue relentlessly, spearing fleeing Persians in the back, cutting them down like harvested wheat. The killing is methodical and pitiless. Alexander rides through the carnage, still pushing forward, eyes locked on the dust trail of Darius's chariot, disappearing toward the eastern horizon. He is so close. If he keeps riding, he can end this war today. He can capture the King of Kings and make Persia kneel. Then a messenger reaches him, horse foaming, voice desperate. "Lord, Parmenion is surrounded. The left is collapsing. If we don't reinforce, they'll be slaughtered." Alexander reins Bucephalus so hard the horse rears. He looks east where Darius is escaping, then west where his own men are dying. His face is stone. Every second he waits, Darius gets farther away. Every second he waits, more Macedonians die. He wheels his horse toward Parmenion. "Companions, with me," and Darius escapes into legend. The battlefield at sunset looks like the end of the world. Bodies stretch across the plain for miles in every direction. Persian, Macedonian, horse and man tangled together in positions that tell stories no one will ever hear. Some died instantly, speared through or trampled. Others bled out slowly over hours, calling for water that never came, for mothers who were 1,000 miles away. The dust has settled now, coating everything in a pale grey shroud that makes the corpses look like statues. The Macedonian wounded lie in rows, while surgeons work by torchlight, amputating shattered limbs, sewing gashes that expose bone. Men scream or weep or stare silently at nothing. The companions, those 7,000 who broke an empire just hours ago, sit in exhausted clusters, too tired to eat, too haunted to sleep. Many are discovering that their closest friends did not survive the charge. They do not speak. They do not celebrate. Parmenion's wing held, barely. Alexander's reinforcement arrived just as the Persian encirclement was about to close completely. The fighting there was desperate and ugly, no glory, no tactics, just men dying in the dust to buy each other minutes. They won. But the cost sits heavy in the camp tonight. Alexander walks through the Macedonian lines alone, stopping at each cluster of wounded, kneeling beside men who cannot stand, learning their names, touching their hands. He does not smile. He does not give speeches. He simply bears witness. When he reaches the companion cavalry, they do not cheer. They look at him with hollow eyes, and he looks back, and something passes between them that has no words. In his command tent later, his generals argue. They could have ended it today. They could have captured Darius. Why did Alexander turn back? Why did he choose his left flank over total victory? Alexander does not answer. He stands at the tent entrance, looking east into the darkness where Darius fled, and everyone understands. He chose his men over his glory. He chose to save lives over claiming a crown. But he also knows the truth settling into his chest like a stone. The empire is already his. Darius is finished. Every Persian satrap and governor saw their king flee twice now. They saw 40,000 cavalry shatter in minutes. The question is not whether Persia will fall. The question is how long it will take Alexander to walk through cities that have already decided to kneel. He looks east, and he sees the future rushing toward him. Babylon opens its gates without a fight, the city that once held Nebuchadnezzar's hanging gardens, that once commanded the tribute of nations, that once made empires tremble. Babylon simply surrenders. The Persian governor rides out with gifts and apologies. Alexander enters in triumph, and the people line the streets throwing flowers, because whoever rules Persia rules them, and Alexander rules Persia now. Susa falls next, then Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of the empire, the city where Darius was crowned King of Kings. Alexander walks up the same steps where Persian emperors received tribute from 40 nations. He sits on the same throne. He does not destroy it. He claims it. What most people do not know is that Darius never stopped running. He fled east into the mountains, desperately trying to rally the eastern satrapies, promising gold and land to anyone who would fight. Some armies gathered. None stayed. The rumor had already spread. Alexander was unstoppable, blessed by gods, undefeated in battle. Why die for a king who fled twice? Darius's own nobles made the calculation. In the summer of 330 BC, 9 months after Gaugamela, a Persian satrap named Bessus murdered Darius in his tent and dumped his body on a roadside, hoping Alexander would reward him for eliminating his rival. Alexander found Darius lying in the dirt, still breathing, blood pooling beneath him. He knelt beside the man who had tried to kill him twice, the emperor of the greatest civilization on earth, now dying alone like a dog. Alexander removed his own cloak and covered Darius with it. He held the king's hand until he stopped breathing. Then he executed Bessus personally. Alexander gave Darius a royal funeral with full Persian honors. He wore Persian robes. He wept openly. And in that moment, something shifted. He was not just a conqueror anymore. He was claiming to be the rightful heir, the legitimate successor to the Achaemenid dynasty. He was not destroying Persia. He was becoming Persia. The empire that ruled the known world for 2 centuries ended not with a final battle, but with a murdered king on a roadside, and a Macedonian boy weeping over his corpse. 300 years of Persian dominance, finished. The entire political order of the ancient world, erased. And it all came down to one moment on a flat plain in Mesopotamia when 7,000 cavalry charged into 40,000 and refused to stop. Alexander stands in the ruins of Persepolis and realizes something that makes him feel strangely empty. He has conquered more than land. He has conquered time itself. The world before Gaugamela and the world after are 2 different places. History has split in half, and he is 26 years old. When historians study Gaugamela, they focus on tactics, the oblique formation, the wedge, the coordinated flanking maneuvers. They analyze troop numbers and battlefield geography. They debate whether Alexander had 30,000 infantry or 40, whether Darius had 200,000 or 3. But tactics do not explain how 7,000 cavalry broke 40,000 in minutes. Numbers do not explain how the largest army ever assembled in the ancient world simply disintegrated. What broke Persia was not military genius, it was belief. Darius believed he could lose. His soldiers believed their king might flee again. And Alexander believed, with fanatical certainty, that he could not be stopped. When those three beliefs collided on that dusty plain, the outcome was inevitable. Empires do not fall to superior tactics. They fall when their people stop believing in them. The cost was staggering. Modern estimates suggest 50,000 dead or wounded on both sides, most of them Persian, most of them in the rout. Young men from Bactria and Scythia and Egypt and Greece, dying far from home for kings, and causes they barely understood. The wounded who survived faced infections, amputations, lives spent begging in foreign cities. The psychological scars never healed. The companions who rode with Alexander that day would wake screaming from nightmares for the rest of their lives. But Gaugamela changed everything. It ended Persian dominance and opened the door for Hellenistic culture to spread from Greece to India. It made possible the cultural fusion that would define the ancient world for centuries. It set the template for every military genius who came after. Caesar, Hannibal, Napoleon, all studied Alexander, all tried to replicate Gaugamela. And it proved something terrifying, that a small force, led by someone willing to risk everything, can shatter empires. Alexander stands alone on the plain as the sun sets, long after the battle, long after the bodies have been burned or buried. The dust still smells like blood. The ground is dark with it. He is the most powerful man in the world now, king of an empire that spans 3 continents. But he looks small standing there, very small. When the dust finally settled on that plain, the ancient world had ended, and a new one, uncertain and dangerous and infinite, was being born beneath Alexander's feet.